As the temps start rising, I feel the familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I don't want to waste money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. Thankfully, Quince changes that. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. It finally feels like my wardrobe matches my standards. The best part is that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes, so you get to look good while feeling good. I'm pretty excited that I have upgraded my athleisure wardrobe for this summer. I bought a sweatshirt and a pair of wide-leg flow pants that are two of the softest items I own, and I plan to live in them. So join me in giving your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
We are 4 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and author of Act for Burnout, Act Daily Journal, and the Act Daily Card Deck.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and author of an upcoming book on being a better conversationalist and making friends.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hi, listeners. We have a very special episode today. We usually do our interviews with authors, but sometimes we have this extra Wednesday in the month where we like to do something a little special or different. And so today we're doing something really fun that we're calling Psychologists on the Clock. And that is doing some exercises on the podcast in real time that we do with our clients.
So I'm going to do an exercise, walk you through one, and Jill is going to do one as well. And both of our exercises are going to work with values. So values are going to play a crucial part in these exercises. So let's give you a little one-on-one on what values are in the ACT concept. And I'll hand it over to our resident expert on all things ACT and values, Debbie Sorensen.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm the expert in this group, but I do a lot of values work and a lot of ACT, but there's a lot of ACT expertise here. We have done episodes in the past on values that we can link to in our show notes if you want to learn more. But in brief, values are sort of these guiding principles for how we want to live, the qualities that we want to bring into our lives, into our actions. Values are all about what's most important and meaningful to us. And values also capture the sense of living a meaningful, purpose-driven life. And as my dear colleague who's here with us, Jill, likes to say, values, to me, I think a lot about Jill's word, the me I want to be, right? Like, how do we want to show up in our lives? How do we want to be as people? How would we want someone to describe us? What are the qualities of person we want to be? And values really do provide us with a sense of direction. We're not meant to be perfectly in line with our values every single moment of the day. That's probably impossible, but to provide this kind of guidance for what we want out of life and also for how we want to handle different situations as they arise.
And it might make sense to talk very briefly about what values are not. Values are not goals. They can certainly be in line with goals, but goals are something you can check off a to-do list. You know when they're done. You might plan a date night with your partner. That's a goal. Values are more like qualities, like I want to show up and be present, affectionate, loving. You're never done with those things. You can't check them off. They're also not feelings. So sometimes my clients will say, I really value being calm, but good luck with that because we get triggered, right? We don't get to choose our thoughts and feelings. They just sort of show up. And values have to be something we can control, like our hands and our feet and our mouths. And they're also not about other people. So I'll sometimes hear people say, well, I really value being respected. And of course you can act in ways that make that more likely, but at the end of the day, whether someone else respects you or not is really up to them. Or I value belonging. Same thing. You can act in ways that make that more likely, but whether people include you or not is out of your control.
Yeah. And something else about values is that you can theoretically apply them to whatever you're doing throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. So, for example, one of my dearly held values is self-care. And I can live self-care when I am with my family, when I'm with friends, when I'm alone, when I'm cooking a meal. I can ask myself, what would this meal look like if I added a little bit of self-care? If it's a really stressful day, what would this day look like if I added a little bit of self-care? Like theoretically, you can bring them. You might not always want to bring a value everywhere. One of my dearly held values is humor, and make copious use of that. I will not bring it to a funeral, for example, unless it's one of my family members, because that's what we do at funerals as well. But theoretically, it's like the ability to say this, and this value I want to bring into this situation, and then take those values a little bit like spices that you would add to a meal, just a little bit of one or two or three values that are appropriate to the action.
Yeah, I love that. So you may prioritize different values depending on context, but the ability to personally and freely choose your values in any moment, they're sort of always freely available to you. So Michael, do you want to start with your exercise?
Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. So this exercise is something that came to my mind from two sources. One was a crappy social media post that immediately got my hackles up, if that's the right way of putting it. And there was something that talked about, you all know these, the comfort zone, the growth zone, and then the last one is the terror zone or the panic zone, meaning like different levels of fear, of anxiety that are brought up depending on where in those zones this activity lies for us. And this social media post was something along the lines of, unless you're really afraid, you're not growing. And I'm thinking I'm not gonna hit like on that one, because that just doesn't work. We have our comfort zone, also known as the same old crap zone, which gets a little bit of a bad rap every once in a while. Then we have the growth zone, which is aptly named for things that we actually want to grow in. And it's a little bit uncomfortable to stay in the growth zone, but it's something where we can sustain being for quite a while if we're using the right skills. And then there's I'm going to call it the terror zone, where it's just unbearable to be there. Like the only response we humans have to being in that panic zone is to run back and hide in our comfort zone. That's just what we do. And so seeing this post that says, yeah, you have to be in your panic zone or you're not growing, is like, yeah, good luck with that. And the other source that led to this exercise was my conversation with Jody Wellman on You Only Die Once, where we both were highlighting enjoying life and having some fun. And a lot of clients that I work with, they're so driven and they want to grow the entire time. And it needs to be more productive and more. And I like to ask, like, what are you doing for fun? Like, what's the good stuff that's happening? What do you chill out with? And so this exercise was born as a look at those three different zones and combining it with values. So this is how, after this long preamble, this is how the exercise goes. You have a piece of paper, and you want to have three circles on that paper. The largest one is like the entire edges of the paper, then a smaller one in there, and then in the center of it, the smallest, which is going to be the one in the middle, in the center, that's going to be your comfort zone. So now you have three circles, your comfort zone, center one, then the next one is the growth zone, and the last one is the terror zone. And now I want you to start writing activities into those zones. So for example, for me, comfort zone would be going to bed early and watching a TV show. It's my comfort zone. My comfort zone is also sit in front of the laptop, watch a movie, and eat way too many unhealthy snacks. Those are like comfort zone activities.
Do you mean like things that are comfortable or more like things that are kind of routine to us? Like, for instance, my comfort zone is kind of staying busy sometimes, but I'm not saying that's like comfortable per se, but that's kind of just my routine.
It's the avoidance. It's like if I stay busy and I feel kind of comfortable.
Right.
Yeah, that goes in there, both the helpful and the unhelpful.
Okay.
So what gives comfort and what feels comfortable.
Yes.
Which can be slightly different.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have to patch some music into these.
I should have brought some Jeopardy music.
Okay, are we just doing comfort or you want us to do growth and terror too at the same time?
Let's go to the next song and do that for growth as well. And then for terror/panic.
Okay, so to define growth zone clearly, this is where we're pushing ourselves, like something that feels a little uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like this 1 or 2 steps outside of your comfort zone for a higher purpose. As in, I don't really want to do it, but I know it's important for me. So, and of course, we don't have to go wild with this. Like, this is supposed to be a document that keeps growing as we find new things to put there. And lastly, your panic zone, your terror zone. Now, this one is a little bit weird because most things that happen in that zone is stuff that we don't want to happen. Like, having your house broken into, that's, panic zone. And it's nothing like that's aspirational, whatever. It's just crap that might, like bad stuff that might just happen. But there are also things in the terror zone that are just so big and so overwhelming that they also evoke that sense of panic. Like, this is too much. Giving a public talk, writing a book, starting my own podcast, like something that is just so big that it doesn't fit into the growth zone anymore because it's just too much panic inducing.
So this could still be something that would relate to values and aspirations, but something that's sort of at this point causes terror rather than growth.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You put this so well. I'm just totally going to steal the way you phrase that and phrase it that way in the future.
This one's hard.
That's because you're not scared of anything, Jill.
That must be it. I'm so fearless. Well, there are definitely a lot of things that are currently in my growth zone that would have been in my terror zone at one time. I guess they're things that are so scary I wouldn't even think about them being in my life, so they're hard to come up with.
Or we can throw some suggestions your way. Have you thought about
jumping out of a plane?
Yeah, that came to mind. Out of a plane that Emily is flying.
Yeah, well, that would make 2 of us in that terror zone together.
Okay, so this is something that will keep growing as you find new things, as you go through the week, through the month, think about new projects. But here's where the values piece comes in, because you have things in your comfort zone, I will guess, that might feel bad for really good reasons. Like Michael sitting in front of the laptop and watching a movie and eating crap food is comfort zone, but it's really not a good idea. And then there are other things in that comfort zone, and this is where the fun part comes in. There are parts in your comfort zone that are really good, that should be done, that should be utilized, that should be enjoyed, where the comfort zone oftentimes has such a bad rep that we're just trying to stay outside of it all the freaking time. And then doing something that is actually comforting and recharging batteries, and maybe spending time with family, friends, or in solitude doing things that we love, gets this bad rap because, I'm stuck in my comfort zone.
Can I add a little self-determination theory to this?
Oh, yeah.
So what that draws on is the competence piece of self-determination theory. So again, the 3 fundamental human needs, according to self-determination theory, are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So that competence piece is really important to feeling like a skilled, person who has something to offer and is living a life of mastery. So I think that gives more credence to this idea of comfort zone too. And relatedness is wrapped up in that, because when we're in connection with others, that nurtures our feelings of competence as well.
The other thing it brings to mind for me that I think is really important with values, and I think will tie into what I'm going to do with my exercise next, is the difference between making a conscious, deliberate choice versus just being on autopilot. And a lot of times when we're sitting on the sofa playing games or scrolling social media, we're not choosing, we're just like taking this path of least resistance because it happens to be what's comfortable and requires the least effort. But to say like, I'm going to choose to spend like easy time with my friends who I love, but it's like an active, conscious, deliberate choice. Or even I'm going to choose to sit on the sofa and scroll social media and play games, but where it's something you're choosing in service of self-care, downtime, relaxation, rather than just kind of being in this default autopilot mode. I think that's something that's really important when it comes to connecting this stuff to values.
Beautiful. So my one goal with this exercise was to get a much better way of explaining it than I ever could. So thank you all for doing that for me.
Teamwork makes the dream work, Michael.
Exactly.
I think what Michael's saying is really important, because I actually think sometimes we get so in the act world, what we call willingness, we get so bound and determined to be willing all the time that we forget that there's a time when it's better to just be with what is, and maybe that's easier, and that's okay.
Yeah, like ACT is not a no pain, no gain therapy, right? It's not this idea that like, unless you're feeling pain, you're not doing it right. It's okay to feel good and comfortable and soothed too, as long as that's not coming at a huge cost to your values.
Right. Like you have to always choose the hardest thing no matter what. And it's like, no, you don't. You get to be flexible and make that choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is where we're creating a little bit of a library beforehand, where we can now look at your comfort zone. And this would be the next step for everyone in you as well, dear listener, is put a little heart around those things in the comfort zone that are good and values aligned. For, most of the time, of course, if you do anything 24/7, it's probably going to be a problem. But for most of the time, like, this is an actually really good idea, something that I love doing in my comfort zone, and that is aligned with values. And cross out those things in your comfort zone that aren't helpful, that are pure and simple avoidance, numbing out, whatever it might be, or rushing into busyness mode just to feel less guilty, or whatever the case might be. So now your comfort zone is left with fewer points, and all of them hopefully with a little heart in front of them.
It's funny because I feel like, some of them are easy to put hearts around, but then even the ones that I wouldn't put hearts around, I wouldn't cross out either.
It's context. That's what I was going to say. It's context.
Because even like, I want to smash out social media because part of me absolutely hates it. And I recognize the value for some connection with certain friends and the way that it helps to network professionally. So even though I don't particularly enjoy it, I do see that it can be values aligned when I'm choosing to utilize it as a tool, in a certain way. And there's a bunch of other things in here that are similar. Like to-do lists are a bit of an avoidance strategy for me, and I would lose track of my whole life if I didn't have them, right? So they're kind of like it reminds us to be flexible and like not engage in too much black and white, like, oh, this is good, this is bad,
Exactly.
because it really is context dependent.
Yeah. It's very much context dependent. Like, as in most things, there's no easy black and white solution. It's very often context dependent. And at the same time, I find that oftentimes this is something that people never start to categorize in the first place. Taking a couple of minutes to look at all of those things and be like, hey, this is, this kind of like works most of the time. This works in specific situations, and this doesn't work at all. And having a little bit of a check-in around that. And we would move forward and do the same thing with the growth zone as well. We can speed a little bit through that because the process is the same. Where are we stepping outside of our comfort zone, facing that discomfort a little bit, and it's serving a higher purpose? Or sometimes it's just not. We're just uncomfortable because, well, I'm supposed to be uncomfortable if I want to be growing. It's this no pain, no gain like mindset. So where is it actually in line with your values and the person that you want to be and your goals as well, to step outside of your comfort zone and into that a little bit uncomfortable growth zone?
That's interesting, because I think this is making me think about the power of language, because I don't have anything to cross out in there. And I think that's because you called it a growth zone.
Mm.
So the only things I put in there are things that are uncomfortable, but that I know are actually helping me to grow and are important to me and are values aligned.
Me too. My other two zones were a mixed bag of things I actually want to be doing and things I don't want to be doing. But my growth zone, everything got a heart around it. It feels like these are all things that are a stretch, but that I really do care about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, a lot of the work that I've done in my journey of developing my own confidence, and that I now do with clients, like a big theme there is to do the uncomfortable stuff, like face fears and uncomfortable stuff that's coming up. And oftentimes this gets then amplified into almost a habit of doing most of the things that feel uncomfortable, simply because they feel uncomfortable. That's why people then start doing them. So this is counteracting that a little bit. In my own example, for example, something that, this is very specific to me, it's in my growth zone, in my uncomfortable zone would be in public getting out of my wheelchair, because I want to stand at the bar to stretch my legs for the 10 minutes that I would be able to stand and just do that. And then I sometimes found myself pushing myself to do that right now, but it's not in line with anything. That's like, I'm not working out. I'm not like doing anything. I would just do it because it's uncomfortable. And that's like, no, that's a little bit pointless.
Now I see more what you're saying. Again, it comes back to choice, that eyes wide open choice. And so what it just made me think of is one of the things I have in my growth zone is like trying to build community and meet new people and make new friends, since I'm relatively new to the space I'm living. But that can be exhausting, that feeling of like, even if you're showing up authentically, it still requires more energy, right? Than if like the four of us are just kind of hanging out, shooting the bull with each other. And so it's like, okay, Jill, you don't have to make plans with a new person every single day because you're really working on growth and building your community. Like, it's okay to do that once in a while. And it's okay to like have the easy chats with the old friends that you don't have to feel like you're kind of on and putting so much effort into, which would be back in the comfort zone. Am I understanding it right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think the theme here is it's all about balance of the different energies. And like you were saying, Jill, certain things just take more energy. And so to have some time just watching TV or playing phone games, like I love my word games on the phone, that's low energy, right? And it's restorative. And that helps us then have the energy for the growth activities. I think it all works together.
Yeah. Great point. And if you don't want to jump out of a plane or run a marathon, which are both things in my terror zone, like just not going to do that. I got plenty of things in my growth zone that I can work on.
I know so many marathon runners, and I run regularly. I've run since I was in college. I don't even call myself a runner. I have zero motivation to do a marathon. Zero. I'm like, all that brings up for me is pain.
Yeah. Right.
But for other people, it means something different. And that's great.
For other people, it's in their growth zone or maybe even their comfort zone. I don't know. I do know some people that do those ultra 100-milers. So maybe a regular marathon for them is in their comfort zone. I don't know.
I would actually argue that from more of an internal personal growth perspective, if you're doing some more insight oriented or just kind of reflecting on the meaning of your life and wanting to reconnect with yourself, that sometimes you actually need some stillness. You need to not add some massive achievement or something that's going to be really, really hard. You need more to just settle into yourself and pay attention to reclaiming those parts of yourself that may have gotten lost on the way. And that's actually kind of the opposite of these big, huge goals. It's just more of an inner stillness and reflection.
Exactly. So just to wrap this up with that terror zone, because yes, there are things like ultra marathon and there's like, why would I even, like, this is not for me. Other things like having my house burglared or broken into, like that's not like ambition either. So those things we can just leave to the side. But there might be a few small items in that panic zone that are so big that we don't dare touch them. We kind of want it, but it's just overwhelmingly big. And this would be the last part of the exercise, to take something like that and break it down into smaller chunks that all fit into the growth zone. So something like giving a public talk or writing a book, which is panic zone, might be broken down into, let's start a Substack and write an article every 2 weeks. A public talk might be broken down into giving a small talk at an audience of a small like organization's free event, whatever, on Facebook, where I talk for 10 minutes and do something. And then what's the next step? What's the next step? And what's the next step? And each one of those steps is daunting, but it's small enough to be in the growth zone. And if you put all of them together over time, you end up with that big outcome, but in smaller incremental and doable steps.
That's what I actually put in my terror zone, what I hope ends up in my growth zone. So that was a good explanation of how to do that.
Yeah, I have 2 things that would fit there too. Like marathon and jumping out of a plane. No, I don't actually have a desire, but I do have a couple things, and that's actually really helpful to think about. Okay, I can't do all of this at once now, but I could break it down and start and values often are about moving in a direction, right? Like taking steps. Like we said, they're not really goals and outcomes, but if it gets you like moving in that direction, that's really helpful.
And what part of the process rather than the outcome, what about the process could be part of the terror and the growth, so that you acclimate to the process piece of it in the growth zone, and then it's no longer in the terror zone.
Yeah. I loved, we had on a guest, Maho Malfino. Do you remember this one from like a long time ago? She came on to talk about a book called Break the Good Girl Myth, I believe. And she talked about the comfort zone and the vulnerability edge, and how like the outside of that comfort zone is your vulnerability edge. And if you kind of like just go into there, right? Just past that place of vulnerability rather than into that terror zone, then the comfort zone grows around you. The vulnerability edge gets a little bit further out. And I don't know if that's actually hers, but that was the first place I had heard it or learned of it. And it just really stuck with me. I really loved that.
Well, that's what I had. So thank you all for participating in this and giving me so many better ways of explaining the entire thing than I ever could. Yay. And I got it recorded too. So thank you. And
thank you, Michael. That was
Thanks,
good.
Michael.
That was great. So what I'm going to lead everybody through is something Michael actually asked me to talk about, because he had come across it in one of my monthly tips newsletters that I send out to my mailing list. And basically, it's about how we can use values to make choices. Because, of course, making decisions is really challenging. They're future oriented, so they're rife with uncertainty. We feel like there's a right answer and a wrong answer, but that's rarely true, right? Usually there are choices. They have consequences. Some we like, some we don't. And we use that information to figure out how we're going to move forward. But that still means we have to move forward in the face of uncertainty. And we can make endless pros and cons lists, and it doesn't necessarily get us any further along. Or I once had someone talk about the process like you're on a treadmill, so you're working really hard, but you're not actually getting anywhere new. And so this was something I came up with to try to help get somewhere new. And so basically, again, you need your paper and your pen or pencil. So all you're going to do is make like a 2x2, one of those boxes. So at the top, you're going to have toward values and away from discomfort. And then on the side, you're going to have the decision that you're trying to make. And so the way that I have this set up is if you're making I'm going to do this or not do this, kind of like a dichotomous decision, right? Like I should quit playing the piano or I should keep working at it. I should leave this relationship or I should stay in this relationship. I should get a new job or I should stay.
so in the simplest case, if I just have a yes/no decision to make, I would have one axis. I would have yes and no. And then for each one, For yes, I would have toward what values is the yes bringing me?
Correct.
And what away moves is this yes doing for me? And then the same for the second option, the no.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And so what we're trying to answer here, the way that we tie the decision making to the values is, what would this decision be in the service of? Typically, we make decisions that are either in the service of moving toward values or away from discomfort or feeling things we don't want to feel. But often it's both. And that's what can make it really tricky. And so getting it down on paper like this can help you sort of look at, what is it in the service of? And if it's in the service of both, does this sort of make it clear which is more values aligned, even if it's also about moving away from discomfort? So I'll give you the example that I used in my newsletter just to help make it a little bit more clear. So I was spending lots and lots of times debating about whether to step down from a board position that I had held for a long time. It was very meaningful to me. It allowed me to contribute to an organization that meant a lot to me. But I was overwhelmed, and I was feeling like I had too much on my plate, and I was feeling less able to give in a way that was as valuable as it used to be when I had first started. And the decision felt grueling to me because it for various reasons. And so I thought about, if I stay in this position, in what ways would that be moving toward my values? It would be honoring a commitment I made. It would be contributing to an organization that I cared about, though I had already been doing that for several years. In what ways would staying be a move away from values where really it was just about me trying to avoid discomfort? Well, it would have helped me to avoid guilt, letting other people down, self-stories like it's bad to quit. It helped me move away from fear that I would be judged negatively or that I would be rejected. So there was a lot in that box. Then think about leaving this position, the organization. In what ways would that be toward values? Self-care, making space for a new leader with greater energy and ability to participate fully. I was trying to actively practice subtracting, like we learned from Leidy Klotz on the podcast, and saying no when it felt necessary. And at this time, it really did. And then in what ways would leaving be a move away from discomfort? And for that, it was none. And so while there would have been relief to have fewer commitments, leaving really felt mostly uncomfortable. So writing all that down in black and white just made it more clear to me that for all those various reasons, leaving was the right thing to do. It was also a really uncomfortable thing to do. And so that's what I want to ask listeners and co-hosts to think about, a decision that you've been struggling to make, especially one that maybe you've been ping-ponging about a lot, and create that. In what ways would option one be a move toward values? In what way would option one really be about just trying to avoid discomfort? In what ways would option two be a move toward values? And in what ways would option two really be more about moving away from discomfort? And I think it's, as you guys work on this, I think it's really important to know that, like, hard decisions are hard, right? We often try to come up with the solution that somehow is both right and pain-free. And I think when we're talking about things that matter to us, that is very rarely going to happen. And then we stay stuck in this like stagnant place of just kind of not moving forward at all, or being on that treadmill where we're working hard mentally to figure it out, but not really getting anywhere new.
And something I say a lot about that is, not making a decision is making a decision.
Yeah.
Because you are landing on one side of it by the very nature of not deciding.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Okay, so while you guys work on that, I'm going to also introduce one other thing that I think can be really helpful when it comes to uncertainty in decision making. And it's a concept from dialectical behavior therapy, Marshall Linehan's therapy, DBT, that is the concept of wise mind. And I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's essentially the idea that we sometimes are in a state of mind called emotion mind, where we're really just, using emotions to make decisions, or rational mind, which is facts and figures and pro-con lists. And if we're only in one or the other of those places, that can be problematic. And the ideal place to be is where these two things intersect. Like if you picture it like a Venn diagram, and where emotion mind and rational mind intersect is wise mind. And wise mind is like this grounded place of intuitive knowing, or like, even though the future is uncertain, you still just kind of have a gut sense that this is the right thing, even if you don't have all the facts and figures to back it up, you know? And so I think we all know when we're there. Like, you guys can probably think of a time that you were like, oh yeah, that was so wise mind. But it can be hard to get there if you're not there. And so I came up with some questions that have helped me to kind of find wise mind. And I use these with my clients. But what's important here is I'm about to read these questions. And what I don't want you to do is to try to answer them. I want you to just sit with the question, okay? Like, just let the question hang in the air and just kind of mindfully sit and sort of notice what happens without actively trying to answer or hunt. You know what I mean? So again, thinking about the same choice that you just created this table for, your option A and your option B, okay? The first question, and these won't all apply, but the first question is, if I didn't feel anxious or worried, what might I choose? If I didn't fear the outcome, what would I do? If no one knew I was doing this, would I still do it? And now, importantly, this is trying to get at motivation. Like, am I doing this because I'm just trying to impress other people or not let other people down? Or is this truly right for me deep down? If someone I admire were watching me right now, which would I choose? And again, importantly, this is not about impression management, but it's really about like being accountable for the behavior that we're choosing. If I'm being truly honest with myself here, what feels really right? And then lastly, even if there's a chance it might all go to hell, does this still feel like the right choice right now? And I used these when I was trying to make a decision about moving my entire family 3,000 miles across the country, when my husband definitely wasn't on board and my kids were ambivalent, you know? And it helped me to kind of get to that place that was sort of like, I can't explain exactly why I feel this way, but I just have this sort of gut intuition that my kids need a fresh start, that this is going to be the right thing for our family. But I didn't know. And that last question was particularly helpful because there was a chance it would all go to hell. There was a chance we would get here and they would all be miserable and it would all be my fault, right? And that's the kind of thing that could really keep you from making a decision. And I'm happy to report that everyone is quite happy to be here. And I even said something to my daughter about how maybe when she goes to college, she would want to go back to California. And she said, ew, no, why? Massachusetts is so much better.
Okay,
And
no offense to Californians, right?
no offense to California, but it just made me, as a mama who was very scared about how this was going to affect my family, it just made my heart very, very happy. And, you know, we all miss California. We all miss the people that are there. And this was still the right thing. So it still wasn't a pain-free choice, and yet it was still the right choice. So what's interesting is when I read these questions, and I'm curious, listeners, you can reach out to us over email or social media, and I'm curious about you guys. Often when I read these questions to people, this some decision they've been laboring over, at the end, they're like, oh my God, of course it's option A. And it's sort of like they knew that all along, and it just kind of needed to come to the surface. So Debbie's battery has petered out, so she's no longer
battery,
with us.
her laptop battery. Like Debbie is fine. Her laptop.
Oh yeah, not
battery.
Debbie's battery. Not her human battery.
Did we not mention that Debbie is actually AI?
She's a robot. So her laptop battery has petered out, so she's not with us for the very end of this. But Michael and Emily, are either of you comfortable sharing?
I'm comfortable sharing. I have to say that I was trying to, my multitasking ability is as useful as a glass hammer. So listening to you and writing at the same time is like maxed out my CPU capacity. I did bring the matrix that I wrote out as I first read that in the in the newsletter. Like that's when I fell in love with the exercise. And that's why I said, hey, you need to run this exercise.
And quick plug for the newsletter for anybody else who wants to sign up, just go to jillstoddard.com. Sorry.
Smooth.
Go
They're
on.
very smooth.
Right? Very smooth. Very smooth.
And so because this is going to be more useful for the exercise, I think, to explain it, to go through that past reflection that I still come back to every once in a while when I doubt or want to modify my decision somewhat. So I'll read out that one instead of the one that I fumbled together while I was also listening at the same time. This was the question, will I write a book? This was a year ago. Will I write a book? And so I have two options, write or do not write. And writing a book would be in service of the following values: responsibility, integrity, and humor. It would, the things that I'm going to avoid by writing a book is that friends would ask me, hey, how's it going? When are you starting your book? When are you starting your book? I'm going to avoid that completely by just starting it. The do not write a book would serve my values of self-care, of selfishness, and of being effective. Those would be values served by not writing a book.
Wait, will you clarify you value selfishness?
Selfishness is I purposefully picked a value that's a little bit pushy. It's a little bit like, what? There would have been words that describe it better, but I like the punch that the word selfishness delivers. And this is a value that I brought into my life at the beginning of this year when I realized that very often I prioritize everyone else over Michael's needs. Someone needs something, Michael says yes. Michael is there for everyone except himself. So yes, there would be better ways of framing like, hey, Michael has rights too. I need to take care of myself. But I like the bite. The word
I get you.
Selfishness.
Yeah. It's like self-care, but with more punch.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And the self-care for me also value. Self-care for me is like taking time off, healthy food, lots of sleep. It's like health-related stuff. Selfishness is like, it's just selfish. The word just works. Yeah, exactly. So this would be in service of not writing a book, self-care, selfishness, and being effective. I would avoid, if I do not write a book, I would avoid the question, what if it fails? And I would also avoid not having a really hard time writing it. So I'll leave it at that. And for the other one, which I just quickly jotted down some notes, I must say that the moment you went through the wise mind questions, I was like, yeah, I got an answer. It's like easy.
And it's all in the service of writing the book, right?
Oh, sorry. No, so the one I was trying to fill out while I was also listening to you was the question, am I going to take a vacation this year? Will I take a long vacation? And as I was going through your questions, like, no, you know what? Actually, it's like, if I'm honest with myself, like, I don't want to. I would just do it because I'm like supposed to. But no, I'm not. I don't.
Interesting. Good. I love it. I'm glad that was helpful.
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
And we know you're writing a book, so we know how when you filled that out a year ago, how that one turned out.
Yes.
Right.
And kudos to your newsletter. Everyone, like and subscribe.
Emily, do you want to share?
I will say that the current decision I'm trying to make, I've realized, I think those wise mind questions absolutely helped clarify the tension in the decision is really what's better for me versus how will other people perceive me. And what's better for me will most likely lead to negative perceptions from other people who are important to me. And so it's a really tough one. And in fact, I don't know how abnormal this is, Jill, but the if no one else knew question was clear what I would do. But then the next one, if someone I admire were watching, what would I choose? And it would be the other choice. So those two answers were different.
That's really interesting. I guess when I think about if someone I admire were watching, I'm thinking of it as like a person who is not involved in this particular situation, like who wouldn't be affected, but is watching you make the choice, right? So someone over here who has nothing to do with this and has no opinion about it is going, does Emily pick the choice that's better for her? Or does Emily pick the choice that avoids people thinking about her negatively? And how would this person over here, which of those choices would you feel more like proud to make or feel that are more values oriented? So sort of separating that person from the decision, if that's possible, even though that might have to be done more hypothetically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful to articulate that, because I think what could happen with that question is you just get wrapped up in judgment of others in general. Right. Which is often going to be a barrier to a decision.
Yes.
I mean, it's apparently a theme, Michael, both of us. It's like, how are others going to see us?
Yeah. And that's why I tried to make the clarification. It's not about impression management. Or you could even ask it like, if there's someone you admire, like the Dalai Lama, if the Dalai Lama was here watching this, what would he think? Or if my 6-year-old child was watching me do this, like, am I showing up as a person I can be proud of in front of people who, who I care about, who I want to see me model integrity or self-care or whatever the value is in that moment. But that is tricky to have to kind of do that separation.
And I would assume that the Dalai Lama is actually listening to this show, by the way. Like,
Dalai Lama.
Pretty certain. Hi, thanks for listening.
I will say there was a decision I made recently where when I went through the questions more retroactively, I was like, yeah, I totally made the right decision. I mean, all of it just hit, where if I removed the anxiety, if I removed fear of the outcome, it was so clear. And it is the decision I made. So it's probably easier to see that. But I think those are such powerful questions. And in my practice on the therapist side, I see that anxiety as such a barrier. It's like cobwebs in the brain,
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Where you can't see clearly while the anxiety is present, or at least loud.
Yeah. And when I was saying, when I read these clients and they're like, oh, duh, it's obviously option A, it's so clear. That doesn't mean that right after that, they're not like, but I don't think I can do that because the brain is still going to do what the brain does. So like, it's just a tool to hopefully like move you forward and create a little more willingness. But at the end of the day, you have to be willing to jump and make a choice, even in the presence of discomfort, because most decisions involve that, If people want to find the specific questions, when you go to my website and just go under like read Jill's tips, I think it's called, the name of that particular issue is Go With Your Gut, because you'll see all of I make my archive public for anyone, even if they're not subscribed. And so you can see all the past tips that I've written. And that one's called Go With Your Gut. So if you want to get those questions for yourself, just click on that link and you can find it to use for yourself or your clients.
Find it in the show notes as well.
Well, thank you, Michael and Emily, for participating in that exercise. And listeners, we hope that you found both of these helpful. Any last comments from the two of you?
Oh, I would just actually, dear listener, be really curious how helpful this was. And this was a spontaneous decision for a bonus episode to just throw some exercises out there. But let us know what you think. Was this something you want to get more of, get less of, never ever do this again? If it's the Dalai Lama, we're always happy to hear from you as well. And just send us some feedback. I'd personally be really curious on how that episode resonated with everyone.
Or if you have other ideas for these bonus episodes, we're all ears. We would love your input.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our newsletter and connecting with us on social media.
We'd like to thank our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment.
If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.
Yeah, that is the first time my dogs have ever barked in a long time. And I do all my stuff. I put a sign on the door. They're in their crates. So I don't know what just
You
happened.
put a sign on your door and
I do.
the
I
dog
say,
reads the sign and goes, "I do not bark."
Do not bark. For the dogs.
It's like the stupid dog isn't reading the sign. Like, what's wrong with it?